I did drop a couple of episodes on two of the misunderstood Pinoy love languages. One is tampo and suyo, which is the antidote for tampo. So if you haven't listened to that, go check out the two previous episodes. But I realized that without talking about self-regulation, which is our ability to self-soothe, and the difference with that and co-regulation, which in general Filipinos are, I find, to be co-regulators, which means seeking others, seeking proximity to find comfort. And things would be amiss. It's almost like you're learning a new language, which in our case, the Pinoy love language, but not knowing when and where to use it. Imagine being in a Mexican restaurant and then looking at the menu and asking for pancit or lumpia. It doesn't work that way, does it? So today, let me focus on self regulation, the difference, especially with Filipino Americans or Filipinos who grew up in the Western culture versus Filipinos in the islands. And after this episode, I'd like to talk more about co regulation. So stick around. Are Filipinos truly bilingual? We use the same language at home but speak in love languages foreign to each other, together but separated. Kamusta? I'm Roanne, licensed psychotherapist mom, immigrant twice, first generation Pinay raising my mixed Filipino-American children in America. I found that after visiting 500 Filipino homes, I continue to be a student of the culture. In this podcast, we would be seatmates in this beautiful cultural classroom. And by the way, did I tell you I need my kaping barako straight from Batangas before each class? If you're interested in learning the deep intricacies of the Filipino culture, especially as it merged with the American culture, talks about trauma-informed care and deepening your Filipino relationships across generations, which includes my fave topic, Pinoy Love Languages, you're in the right place. By the way, this episode is brought to you by the masterclass Pakiramdam, which means sensing the other absent of words, which is the true Pinoy love language. So if you haven't checked out this masterclass, what are you waiting for? Can you believe it? At this time, limited time, it's only $27 and it's packed with just great information that is rarely spoken about in the Philippines or in the diaspora. So check out the show notes for the link. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Leia who left us a review. Thank you, Leia, so much for taking the time. She goes, love, Rowan's insight truly helps me navigate my Filipino-American heritage. Together but separate is a powerful line. Can't wait for more episodes. Maraming salamat, Leia. Hi there, kamusta? This is Roanne with the Pinoy Love Language podcast. Let's go straight to the point because time is precious. Self-regulation is finding a way to soothe you. And let me give you an image while you're listening to me. So if you grab a bell, in between the bell is a clapper. So that's the one that hits the wall of the bell so it'll make a ringing sound. So self-regulation is the ability to, when our nervous system, our body feels dysregulated, we feel anxious, overwhelmed, frustrated, the bell is that clapper inside would be ringing, right? It's like dysregulated. And the ability to self regulate is the ability to slow down that bell or the clapper in that bell, right? So just as I'm speaking, you can begin to imagine in your mind how when you are swaying slowly, it helps that clapper to be in a slower pace until it reaches the center. And then guess what? When it reaches the center, you no longer hear a sound. Now it's calm. Now it was able to self soothe. So self regulation is very similar to that. Now, we all have different techniques as to ways to soothe ourselves. So, some people might need to pace back and forth. Some people might need to maybe just read a book, sip some hot tea, journal. So, we're all beautiful, unique human beings. So you want to discover what suits you. So that's my question to you as you're listening to me. What suits you? Now, the research on attachment theory, which is, we call it a theory, but it's really the science of attachment and love. Self regulation begins when someone is able to successfully co-regulate with us. Now, that's another term, and I'm going to focus more on that in the next episode. But just to kind of like give you a framework, co-regulation is imagining when a baby's crying and the mom picks up the baby, and there's synchronicity there when you watch their movement. Mom shoos the child, and the baby starts to calm down, feeling safe, secure. Oh, mom's gonna be here. And when you do that over and over and over again, it teaches the child that the world is safe. I'm able to explore. I can go back to mom. I can co regulate with her. So as the child grows up, maybe the child is able to explore more their environment. And then when they get the boo boo, they want to find comfort. So they'll go back to mom. Mom would be doing the same thing, maybe blowing off on the boo boo. It's okay, honey. It's all right. And that makes the child feel good. So it's co regulation. Another way to put it is to be under one big umbrella if it's raining. So the rain would be frustration, it would be a feeling of being unsafe in the outside world. But in that umbrella, with someone else holding that umbrella, or it might be you co regulating with someone, it makes you feel safe. It helps you. You soothe by that proximity with someone else. So that's co regulation. We know that the successful teaching of self regulation, that feeling of safety, begins when a child, a baby, has had that repeated experience of a parent or a caregiver looking them in the eye and not even saying, but just giving them an experience that I got you. There's nothing that you can do that would make me look down on you. I have your back, basically. Now, self regulation is highly emphasized in more individualistic societies. And there are, data of cultural psychologists collating their information, which basically states that America is, if not the one, I've heard even that America's the number one, but let's just be fair and say one of the top three most individualistic culture. And imagine you living in America and the Philippines, the Filipino culture is one of the most collectivistic. I might have shared already in this podcast that there is a study, was a study comparing Korean families and Filipino families in America. And some Korean families are monolingual when they first immigrate here. Filipinos are usually bilingual. But even then, even in that finding, they found that Filipinos are more tied to their culture, and the elders expect more of their children as far as following the roots, the way things are in the motherland. There is an expectation to be the same in a different world, if you will. Now, this makes sense when you're in an individualistic culture. The values of being independent, self determination, basically making your own choices are very important. And in a culture that's very collectivistic, it's almost like you belong in a circle and kids are holding hands, if you could imagine that, and you're in a circle. For the circle to be able to move from one place to the other, everyone has to have a similar pacing. And if you move too fast or too slow, it's possible that you would distort the shape of that circle. And so, thereby, in a collectivistic culture, those things are frowned upon. If you are moving away, going astray, and leaving others behind, so to speak, there is a social way of behavior to control those. So if you imagine in a very collectivistic culture, just an image as you're listening to me, I find that giving you an image might be helpful to your learning and because it's helpful to mine. So imagine holding hands with your friends and you're forming a circle. So, in a collectivistic culture, if you walk too fast or too slow, it's possible that you might lose your grip or you might distort the shape of the circle. And that's why, if you're not following the pacing, sort of like the social norms and rules, those things are frowned upon. And to maintain that shape of circle, there are certain social control behaviors such as shaming that is reinforced because it's telling someone go back to the circle and don't distort the shape of the circle. So in a more collectivistic culture, the value of cooperation, working together, deciding for the common good, those are very much emphasized. Now, I want to say this is not an argument which is better, like individualistic culture or collectivistic culture, because later down the line in our other episodes, I certainly would talk about the shadows of being in a collectivistic culture and also in a very individualistic culture. But for now, I want you to know that there is a context, there is a difference. Now, as I speak about more about co-regulation in the next episode, co-regulation is very unique in the Filipino culture. We have our tita, even some of you might have heard of helpers, yayas in the household, our uncles, our siblings, all those play a role in that circle. Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll talk self regulation, but more digging deeper. So, dyan ka lang. This episode is brought to you by Story Therapy. This is therapy and coaching blended together that hugs neuroscience, creativity, and honoring the wisdom of your body to heal. It's a 3-month framework that includes 10 one-on-one sessions with me. To check out if we're a good fit, see the link in the show notes for a complimentary consult. Thanks for sticking around. I also want to share with you that you can ask questions to this Filipina therapist. If you have a specific scenario, and of course, we would not share your personal information, sort of like a case scenario you want to play out that we can maybe solve together in this podcast, you can email me info@calamansijuice.com. And again, everything will be in the show notes. So, let's continue about talking about self-regulation. The truth is, one can look calm in the outside, like they got it together, but inside they may be feeling like a volcano ready to erupt. This is the reason why at times I use oximeter. To this is to measure the oxygen when people are more stressed, even though they look calm, their oxygen level would show that. And so when you're doing couples therapy, the one that looks like he may be calm, we set the oximeter on a certain level so that even though physically everything seemed fine, the body communicates in a different way and it would actually go off. Now, I didn't discover this. This is from the Gottman couples therapy approach, if you're familiar with that. Now, going back to self regulation. So, self regulation is crucial whether you are in America, Canada, in diaspora, or in the Philippines. it's both dance. We need to be able to self regulate, right? Because to simply depend on someone else for our emotional state would be difficult, because then we would be wearing our emotions on our sleeves, or our emotions will be depending on someone else's emotional temperature. So it's important to learn how to gauge how you're feeling. And you begin that by sensing your body. Are you nervous? Do you feel warm inside? Is your heartbeat racing? Do you have shallow breathing? When our needs are not met, we develop strategies to cope. And we observe this in the strange situation experiment with kids and babies over and over and over again in different countries. And that when babies are ignored, when the mom comes back after being separated, they've learned how to cope by like being nonchalant about the mom, because they have to be able to survive in the world where a mom might not be completely in tune with them. Now, if you're a mom listening to this podcast, take heart. Even in studies, we don't have to be in tune with our children 100% of the time. Like they say, 60%, 60 something percent of the time, attuned parents are really at the eye level of their children. So there is much leeway there. If you think about, of course, this is not exact science, but about 40% of you, because we are busy and we're still doing things, that our children would still be all right, but they do need our attention. Quality, whether it's relationship or craft that you're developing, entails time and attention. And it's the same with ourselves and in raising our children. So it's important to discover what suits you. And when you are not enjoying the moment, you can tell, because either you're worried about what's about to happen, or things would end soon, all good things are bound to end, or you're thinking about this was done to me. Depression is about thinking about the past, right? And anxiety is about preventing a threat in the future. Sometimes we have anxiety of having anxiety, but regardless, sometimes you don't even have to know the exact memory, the exact event. Your body knows those types of memories, and it's an alert system. So one of the things that you can look at that's positive is that your body's working. Like if you get agitated right away, our bodies are wired, part of evolution, to prevent harm, to prevent us from being eaten by a big animal. And so if you've seen a big bear, you don't have to even remember, but how can you forget, right, that you have that scenario? But your body would remember that when you are in a space that's similar to where you've been when you've seen a bear, it will create that reaction, because it's like alert. It's like bling bling bling, alert system. The problem with that is that even when you're no longer there, there's no bear, it's not a forest, is when your body's still responding. Now, if you have a hard time finding ways to self soothe, this is a practice, and be kind to yourself. Usually, this is you develop this by the parent being very attuned to you. And if you didn't have that experience, it's not never too late, but it would be a practice. You can begin by first removing distractions from your life, or allowing yourself space. So, if you are in a high demand job, you probably have to check your social media, and that's fine. Give yourself, like, maybe in the morning, just to begin 20 minutes of sensing your body, right? Noticing your breath, right? So, as you listen to me, noticing your breath, take a deep breath and exhaling, and allow that exhalation to be elongated. Okay, let's do that a couple of times. So take a deep breath and allow that exhalation to be prolonged. One more time, take a deep breath and allow that exhalation to be prolonged. Now, sometimes people might need a therapist, or sometimes it's just a matter of practice. If you need a mental health professional, go seek one, find one that matches you. If you're interested in seeing me, I'll also drop the link to schedule a consult with me. But for now, I am going to stop, just do a quick summary of what we talk about. It's important to self regulate. It is not a question of is it better to co regulate or self regulate. We cannot depend on others wholly for our wellness. So it's important that you have tools so that when you don't have other people to co-regulate with, that you can focus on your breath, or you can journal, or you can just talk to your inner child if you need to do that. Next up, I am going to talk about co-regulation, and this is really a tribute to topics that we rarely speak about in, especially in the Filipino American culture, which is so crucial to understand, because even though we have tips and tricks that we hear about, this is how we talk to our elders, and elders, this is how we talk to our young, without understanding how uniquely different we self regulate and co regulate, things would be a mess. So, if you want to learn more about the Filipino culture, something that you don't really hear yet in the mainstream, and I'd be happy if we hear more, not just from me but from other professionals. But for now, you can check out the masterclass on pakiramdam, and thank you so much for taking a listen. Sa uulitin. Bye.